Well, ladies and gentlemen, I say a few words in English, but we will switch from English to French, not Arabic tonight. So let me just say a few words about this panel and the way it integrates with the rest of the program. Initially, we had a slightly different panel, but as you could see, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Qatar had to leave earlier, so he was our guest of honor for lunch. And the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iran, Mr. Hussein Amir Abdullahian, is coming. He's the Vice Minister of Foreign Affairs of Iran in charge of the Arab countries and Africa. So he is coming, but on Sunday morning. So the discussions on the Middle East are split at least in three parts. Under the current circumstances, it's the best we could do. But well, we have a very distinguished panel tonight. So let me introduce briefly the speakers, just in the order they figure here, but the order they will speak will be slightly different, and they do not know it yet, by the way. To my left, Youssef Amrani, whom you know because he already participated in the WPC, so he is advisor, the diplomatic advisor to the King of Morocco. Elisabeth Guigou, qui est présidente de la Commission des Affaires étrangères de l'Assemblée nationale française, et que je remercie de tout cœur d'être venue aujourd'hui, parce que c'était en plus assez compliqué. Tout est compliqué ces jours-ci. Mais je remercie très très vivement Elisabeth d'être parmi nous ce soir, et je crois que sa présence, compte tenu des circonstances, revêt aussi une importance toute particulière. Mona Makram Ebed, que vous connaissez bien également, donc, qui est sénatrice égyptienne avec une très grande expérience publique et académique. Et nous avons pensé que le point de vue de l'Égypte devait être représenté, n'est-ce pas, Mona? On a pensé unanimement que c'est... Mais de toute façon, ceux qui connaissent Mona savent que, d'une manière ou d'une autre, elle s'arrange toujours pour exprimer son point de vue, fortement même. Since I cannot switch to Russian, I say it in English. So Vitaly Naumkin. Vitaly Naumkin is now the scientific director of the Oriental Studies Institute in Moscow. He was, I think, until recently the director. And he is, I can tell you, unanimously considered as the best expert on the Middle East in Russia today. He was, I think, if I am not mistaken, Vitaly, the successor of Evgeny Primakov, who was later on Prime Minister of Russia, who passed away recently. So thank you very much for being with us tonight. Jim Hoagland, who already spoke this afternoon, and who is very well known from all of you. And last but not least, a very interesting personality, Bernard Simon, who is a British citizen. And as you will see, his English is very English and very good. But he was born in Iraq. So he was born as an Iraqi citizen. He's an investment banker, and as many of you know, the bankers usually know and understand politics quite well. So he's extremely well informed. So, merci beaucoup. Et je voudrais passer la parole en premier à Elisabeth Guigou, compte tenu plus spécialement des derniers événements auxquels il faut rajouter ceux d'aujourd'hui.
Ouais, malheureusement.
Puisque donc une nouvelle tragédie aujourd'hui à Bamako, je comprends que c'est terminé, mais c'est encore un événement de plus dans cette longue série qui n'est malheureusement sans doute pas terminée. Elisabeth.
Well,
You have the floor.
thank you, Thierry. Thank you for inviting me again. I'm very happy and honored to be with you again this year in the World Policy Forum. I will switch to French because I think that if French people don't speak their own language, I don't know who will. So maybe Youssef and Mona.
J'espère que Youssef va parler français, bien qu'il ait dit qu'il allait parler anglais.
Non, moi j'avais préparé en anglais. Vous m'avez dit.
Tu n'as pas besoin de préparer.
D'accord.
But how long do you want me to? How much time do you give us?
7 minutes, 8 minutes.
I'll try to keep inside the time. Alors, Paris, oui, 129 morts, 352 blessés, 19 nationalités différentes. C'est évidemment une tragédie sans précédent, non seulement par son ampleur, mais aussi par la façon dont ça a été fait, de façon très professionnelle, alors qu'on avait plutôt le sentiment que les précédents attentats étaient le fait de gens, d'hommes de main, plutôt amateurs. Et puis, dans la simultanéité, dans l'ampleur, des équipes qui se sont déployées, et puis en raison de qui a été visé, des victimes. Parce que ces victimes, ce ne sont pas des personnalités ou des symboles, c'est juste des jeunes, comme tout le monde, une jeunesse diverse, métissée, différente souvent, mais unie par une même joie de vivre. Et c'est ça qui a voulu être atteint. Un mode de vie, un art de vivre même, c'est-à-dire des jeunes qui aiment le sport, se retrouver avec des amis à la terrasse des cafés. Donc je crois qu'il faut prendre conscience de ça, ce qui veut dire évidemment que en France, on voit se développer le sentiment que ça peut se reproduire n'importe où, n'importe quand, vis-à-vis de n'importe qui. Et pourtant, malgré ça, je ne cesse de rencontrer des gens qui me disent « mais il ne faut pas justement se laisser terroriser par les terroristes, il faut montrer qu'on reste debout, qu'on n'a pas peur, il faut continuer à vivre comme avant ». Et d'ailleurs, ça se voit dans les réactions publiques que nous avons pu enregistrer. C'est vrai que ce qui a voulu être atteint, c'est pas tellement, je vais y revenir tout à l'heure, ce que la France fait ou ne fait pas d'ailleurs au Moyen-Orient, c'est ce que nous sommes, ce que nous représentons dans l'histoire aussi, et merci pour la solidarité internationale magnifique qui s'est exprimée par notre drapeau sur les plus beaux monuments, notre hymne national qui a été joué à beaucoup d'endroits. Donc ça donne du baume au cœur. Ayant dit cela, je crois qu'il faut évidemment dépasser l'émotion et voir comment nous pouvons agir. Comment nous pouvons agir pour la paix et la stabilité au Moyen-Orient, puisque tu nous invites, cher Thierry, à voir comment envisager l'avenir du Moyen-Orient. Moi d'abord, je pense que l'essentiel, c'est de prendre conscience qu'il nous faut agir ensemble, Européens et Africains, parce que j'espère qu'on parlera aussi du Maghreb, de l'Afrique subsaharienne. D'ailleurs, on voit Bamako, tout ça, c'est de la Mauritanie, du Sahel, en passant par la Libye et par l'Égypte et jusqu'au Liban, c'est une même nébuleuse, qui d'ailleurs a fait la jonction. Donc je crois que nous avons besoin d'agir ensemble et nous avons toutes les raisons de le faire parce que plus que jamais, l'avenir de l'Europe et de l'Afrique et du Moyen-Orient sont liés. Non seulement en raison de la proximité géographique et justement de ces liens terribles qui peuvent se créer, mais aussi parce qu'en raison des liens humains entre nous qui tiennent à l'histoire, qui tiennent au fait que nos populations sont mêlées, qui tiennent au fait que quand il y a l'instabilité au Moyen-Orient, l'Europe ne sait plus comment maîtriser et accueillir des réfugiés. Et puis, parce que, évidemment, maintenant, nous avons un ennemi commun, qui est cette idéologie de mort et de destruction, qui n'a évidemment rien à voir avec l'islam, mais qui prend l'islam en otage. Et ça, c'est un ennemi que nous devons affronter ensemble, parce que si nous ne le faisons pas ensemble, je crains qu'il ne continue à prospérer. Alors, agir ensemble, comment? D'abord, ISIS ou Daesh, c'est 30 à 40 000 combattants. Si nous avons une stratégie commune, mais qui utilise tous les leviers, franchement, c'est un ennemi que nous pouvons vaincre. Pas seulement contenir, mais vaincre. Évidemment, là, il faut réunir tous les acteurs. Alors, tous les acteurs, tous les pays de la région, mais aussi, naturellement, les États-Unis, la Russie, évidemment acteur essentiel et qui doit évidemment avoir une place tout à fait éminente, et qui l'a d'ailleurs dans le jeu international, et spécialement dans cette région. Et puis, tous les États de la région, quelles que soient les différences entre eux, on connaît bien les antagonismes traditionnels. Et je pense que là, la réunion de Vienne, du 14 novembre, la seconde, qui a réussi ça c'est vraiment déjà quelque chose. Il faut évidemment, en jouant sur tous les leviers, ne pas... il y a les actions militaires. Nous savons ici que les solutions ne sont jamais militaires, les solutions sont politiques, mais les actions militaires sont nécessaires. J'espère qu'on reviendra dans la discussion sur la meilleure façon de combiner les actions aériennes, qui sont celles que mène la France avec d'autres pays, et ce qui me paraît quand même nécessaire aussi de développer à un moment, mais ça ne peut pas être le fait de la France en tout cas, des actions au sol, si on veut vaincre Daesh. Mais la vraie solution est politique, et là, les résultats de la conférence de Vienne du 14 novembre sont encourageants, je trouve, parce qu'on a des choses précises, on y reviendra sans doute, on a un calendrier, on a une stratégie. Au fond, jusqu'à présent, tout le monde disait, on veut lutter contre Daesh, la solution est politique, mais on n'avait pas engagé un processus politique. Or là, on a un début de processus politique avec des objectifs précis. Et puis, il faut s'attaquer au financement de Daesh. On ne vaincra pas Daesh seulement par des actions militaires. Daesh a mis la main sur Mossoul, sur des avoirs de la Banque centrale, il y a le pétrole, il y a des trafics en tout genre, donc on ne s'attaquera pas. Et là, il faut évidemment, on a commencé au G20 aussi, en Turquie, à Antalya, il faut évidemment intensifier nos actions. Ma dernière remarque, ça peut dire, oui, mais ça prendra du temps tout ça, évidemment. 5 ans, 10 ans, pas autant, mais enfin, ça prendra du temps. Mais après, comment faire en sorte d'éviter les répliques? Comment faire en sorte que la stabilité soit durable? Et là, il me semble qu'il y a 2 choses essentielles qu'il faut d'ores et déjà préparer. D'abord, une lutte beaucoup plus intense et coordonnée contre la radicalisation. Et ça, c'est évidemment l'affaire des États, bien sûr. C'est aussi l'affaire des chefs religieux. C'est un combat interne à l'islam, puisqu'il y a ce dévoiement et cette prise en otage. De la part des autres religions, c'est la volonté, évidemment, de ne pas céder aux amalgames, encore moins, évidemment, aux discriminations. Et puis, ça regarde les citoyens. Moi, je crois que face à ce discours de radicalisation qui se répand essentiellement par Internet, eh bien, il faut que nous donnions aux citoyens, la vaste majorité silencieuse que l'on n'entend pas, les moyens de s'exprimer aussi sur Internet pour bâtir un contre-discours qui viendrait justement de la population et du bas. Et puis enfin, c'est vraiment mon dernier mot, il faut agir pour la cohésion sociale, parce que nous savons très bien que le chômage, les inégalités, la corruption sont des terreaux. Ça n'explique pas tout et ça ne justifie sûrement rien. Mais enfin, ce sont des terreaux pour ces idéologies mortifères. Voilà, ça prendra du temps, mais peut-être est-ce qu'au fond, ces événements tragiques que nous auront accéléré notre prise de conscience, et ce qui se passe aussi bien en Europe, d'ailleurs, on y reviendra peut-être, qu'au Moyen-Orient, voilà, montre que peut-être il y a un début de réaction commune.
Bien, merci Elisabeth. Alors, je crois qu'il y a beaucoup de sujets sur lesquels il faudra revenir, pas nécessairement d'ailleurs dans cette session. Je rappelle qu'on aura une session importante dimanche sur la question des réfugiés, par exemple, qui est clairement liée à l'évolution au Moyen-Orient. Mais il y a un point sur lequel j'aimerais bien qu'on revienne tout à l'heure dans cette session, c'est le processus de Vienne. Ce qui est assez remarquable, c'est que la presse, en raison justement des attentats du 13 novembre, n'a pratiquement pas parlé, et même pas du tout, hein, de ce qui s'est passé à Vienne le même week-end, alors que c'est probablement quelque chose d'important. Hein. Voilà. Alors maintenant, je vais passer la parole à Youssef, parce que le point de vue aussi du Maroc est extrêmement important dans cette affaire. Et donc, Youssef, tu peux mélanger le français, l'anglais, mais pas l'arabe.
D'accord. I will first try to react to your question about Vienna. I think you are right. The meeting of the P5 countries plus the regional players, as regard to Syria, they could not reach an agreement in Vienna. There was an agreement that was reached on a number of issues with the regard of maintaining Syria territorial unity and with regard to the future of Syria as a democratic state, in which ethnic and religious groups will coexist. There was also a commitment, and I'm speaking under the control of my colleague from Russia, expressed by the participants on how we should, in the future, provide assistance, humanitarian assistance to Syria, and that we will work for a future Syria. But there was no agreement as far as, and there was a divergence as far as the timing and the withdrawal of Bashar Assad. This is only to respond to your question about Vienna, but I think there will be new meetings, and the crucial issue is the withdrawal of the foreign fighters in Syria. I would like to ask two questions, if you allow me. The first one is, I will be very brief. Where is the region today? I think everybody knows that the region is collapsing. And when I talk about the region, I'm talking about the Middle East, plus the Maghreb, and beyond Africa, especially the Sahel, because this is something, all the issues are connected. So for me, the region is the MENA region, the broader Middle East and North Africa. Today is collapsing. Lot of challenges. Syria, more than 300 casualties, more than 10 million refugees. It's a big issue. A country who is fragmented in three, divided. The state, which is run by the Islamic ISIS plus Jabhat al-Nusra, the other is by the Sunni and Kurd opposition, and the one by the nation. Iraq also, it's a complicated issue. Again, the extremists are taking the lead because Iraq is still despite the efforts of reforms of the government, still a lot of division in this country. And we don't have to forget Libya. Libya is also a very complicated issue. Unfortunately, Bernardino is not here, and Morocco has been working with Bernardino Leon for the last months in Morocco, in Skhirat, in order to bring all the different Libyan factions to work for a constitution setup and for the formation of a new government. It was difficult. After months, we were able to reach a compromise for the government, but it is complicated and difficult, because how can you implement democracy in a country where there is two parliaments, two governments, no civil society, no political parties? This shows you that the difficulty of the region. So today, and I agree completely with my colleague Elisabeth, that only a political solution, inclusive dialogue, and democratic institution can help us to move forward in these negotiations. So, in this connection, I want to ask another question that was this morning asked by some American journalists. We have to be very careful. People are thinking today by creating new entities in the region to try to solve the issues, like creating 3 states in Syria or 3 states in Iraq. This is in some minds of some people who think about the region, the future of the region. For us, as Morocco is concerned, we think the respect of the independence, the unity, and the territorial integrity of state is essential. We cannot create more states, because more states, more vacuum, more ISIS, more integrous movements. So I think we cannot afford any more weak and fragile states in our region. That's why for us it is important to counter this dash and this movement. And I'm not going to forget, and this sometimes a lot of people forget about the Middle East peace process. I think something is essential here. We cannot have peace in the region, stability in the region, if we don't work to put the peace process back on track on the Middle East between Israeli and the Palestinians. There's something, because if we don't do it today, maybe in the future we will create some vacuum, and maybe in the future we have some other ISIS coming to the region. So the Middle East peace process has collapsed. We need to put it back on track to be able to move forward. Now, Sahel. Sahel is a great security concern, not only for the Maghreb countries, but also for you, European Elisabeth. As you know, we have seen that everything is interconnected. And the security of the Maghreb is the one of the Sahel and of Europe, because Al-Qaeda in the Maghreb, Boko Haram, and other organizations are trying to work. So if there is, I will go straight forward, there is a lesson from all this, I call it geopolitical mess. I will say that, and you said it, Elisabeth, that no state or multilateral actor alone have the power to impose or to manage or to solve the crisis. We need, as you said, a shared responsibility to face this issue. And that, the second element, is that the military intervention, it is, yes, sometimes essential, but it doesn't solve the issues. Only a political development support can help us to move forward. So where is our region moving today? This is my second question. And how maybe we could work in this connection. I think we need something new for our region. And I'm sorry to say, Elisabeth, yesterday, Mrs. Mogherini has issued a new neighborhood policy for the European Union. And it is the same tools, not big ambition, how to move forward to accompany the efforts in the region. We were all of us, France, Morocco, other countries, trying to insist for Europe to have an ambition for its neighborhood, to have a new vision, to have new tools in order, but we still have the same differentiation, more for more, less for less, and more than that, and Mauritania is here, again, the security dimension, it's always present in this communication to the European Union. Now, of course, we should not only blame the others, we should also do our own homework internally. We should build up democratic state. We should build up also coherent regional integration, like in the Maghreb, for example. Maghreb is not working. And Maghreb could be an opportunity, not only to face the security challenges, but also to create health, to create wealth. Because at the end of the day, what is important today for our young generation is the creation of jobs to promote growth. And it is our own responsibility to do it. So we need, I think 3 dimensions. I will be very quick because I know time is running. We need to work in the political sphere, by ensuring stability of all countries, building up democratic countries based on good governance, because at the end of the day, we share the same values. Islam is not in contradiction with the human rights. Of course, we'll talk about later on. I will finish by that. Second, security matters. It is interesting, it is important that we have a cooperation at the field of security, exchange of intelligence. Thanks to this exchange of information, intelligence, we'll be able to defeat Daesh. And the third dimension is economic development. It's essential that to create wealth and perspective for this shared prosperity. 3, and then my last point, maybe I would like not to speak about my country, but maybe as you invited me, just to exchange with you some ideas that we will be experiencing in Morocco. I think if Morocco was able to move forward, is thanks to 3 elements: the vision, the leadership, and the instruments and with the approach. The leadership, because we had the king, Mohammed VI, who was a driving force to put the country ahead, to move forward, to build up a democratic country. 2, the vision is to consolidate, because we have been achieving a lot, and we made a big choice. It's a long process, and we make this choice since our independence. And the 3rd one is the approach. We had to work with all the political parties, with our civil society. And we have learned through this experience to compromise and to listen to the other. And this, I think, is a genuine experience that enables us to build up something consistent. And I think we have a clear vision for the future. And finally, let me finish by tackling one of the most important issues today, I think. You touched it, Elisabeth, today, the priority. Of course, we have the security intervention, we have the economic development, the political. But today the priority is to deconstruct the jihadist narrative, to deconstruct the jihadist discourse. This should be a priority because Islam has nothing to do with this kind of crazy things. And to be able to do it, we need a coherent and sustained counter-messaging, strategic communication, because these guys are very strong. They use internet, they use the communication, they use the media, and we need that to deconstruct this ideology of the jihadists and the threat they pose, not only to our region, but to the whole world. And we need for that, we need the voices, we need the leadership, we need the people who understand Islam. Morocco is trying to do its best. We are training imams and men and women in Africa. We are working together, Morocco and France, in the training of imams, because Islam, the radicalization today, is not only a question of Muslims in the Muslim countries. How many Muslims are in France today? There is Islam de France. It's important. And France today is doing its best to integrate this population to work. And this, I think, we need the tools to undermine this radicalization or this extremist philosophy. This should be done through countering Daesh narrative, to facilitating counter-messaging through leaders. I know today, maybe you can tell us, in the UK, and even in Egypt, Azhar, they are trying to do some work, but I think we need to join our efforts. A country alone cannot do it. We need to coordinate a strategic communication to isolate Daesh as a terrorist and criminal group. And maybe for you, we can maybe propose you a platform with you, with her, because she is also in her capacity as a president of the Analyst Foundation, to work on this issue. Because I think we can, work together in order to put all the people together to build up something that can help us to coordinate and to fight these extremists. Of course, we need to solve the conflicts, but this is another story. Thank you.
Bien, merci Youssef, c'est extrêmement important et intéressant, mais il faut qu'on accélère un peu parce que we will be in trouble because the subject is so rich. Alors maintenant, je passe la parole à Mona qui va aussi sauver l'honneur de la langue française en parlant français. Mona,
hein, pas tout à fait, mais enfin.
Ah, bah, ouais. Quand même, c'est ma condition. Alors, Mona, l'Égypte est au premier plan des tragédies aussi. Today, I think no one tries to deny that the Russian plane was shot, was exploded. L'Égypte se trouve dans une situation économique encore plus désespérée, est soutenue à bout de bras par l'Arabie Saoudite qui elle-même se trouve en difficulté financière. Et ce n'est qu'un exemple de toutes les tragédies du Moyen-Orient.
Merci Thierry, merci de m'avoir invité. Je commence par présenter vraiment mes condoléances au peuple français. Nous aussi, on a mis le drapeau français sur les pyramides, ce qui est une première. Et je dois vous remercier d'être à Montreux, parce que Montreux, pour nous, est une ville historique. C'est là où a été signé le traité de Montreux, l'abolition des capitulations qui était le début de l'indépendance de l'Égypte. Bon. Revenons à ce que vous venez de dire. Bon, nous avons vu que le ciel du Sinaï, Beyrouth et Paris, Daesh a frappé au-delà de ses frontières. Ça, c'est la nouvelle stratégie. Ce n'est plus fondé sur un seul pays, sur une seule entité, mais transnationale. Et c'est ce que le président Sisi, dès son entrée en fonction, avait mis en garde toute la communauté internationale que nous avons affaire à une menace transnationale à vocation globale. Ce n'est pas nous seulement qui sommes attaqués, mais c'est justement ce que nous venons de voir dans ces 2 dernières semaines. Or, évidemment, moi je voudrais parler un petit peu de l'Égypte. Aujourd'hui, l'Égypte fait face à des enjeux extraordinaires, à l'intérieur comme à l'extérieur. Et je vais passer à l'anglais un petit peu maintenant. Alors, the main question of challenge in Egypt today is how can the government effectively counter terrorism without threatening civil liberties? C'est ça dont on parle toute la journée. What reforms are needed to make Egypt's security sector effective, accountable, and in line with international human rights? How can the international community play a productive role in encouraging and facilitating the reform efforts, instead of today accusing Egypt of repressing measures that France is adopting, by the way, in the past 2 days, when you have people who are threatening you daily in the Sinai, not only attacking the civilians, but the army and the police who are trying to safeguard the borders of Egypt. So, till now the government has struggled to find an appropriate and effective response to counter the threat of terrorism and to face significant challenges both inside and outside, as the country is facing major terrorist attacks that have negatively affected the country's security and economic stability. But as you have said, Elisabeth, we will get over Daesh. And Sharm el-Sheikh was bruised, of course, by the Sinai jet crash of a Russian plane, which prompted, unfortunately, many countries to suspend flights to the resort. And this is one of our main income, which is tourism. So we know that there is a protracted regional conflict. It is not going to be solved tomorrow. And the international community should give the region the tools to be able to solve some of the challenges that we are facing. The challenges are today unemployment. The challenges are education. I was so pleased today with the president of Switzerland when he focused so much on vocational training. And that's what we need. That's what the international community must do today. Try to find out what are the roots of this frustration today. It's not only when you think that young people, as you said, would love to come to enjoy their lives, are today preferring to be martyrs for the sake of God, for the sake of Allah, for the sake. I want to remind you that the first one who has spoken about the need to reform the Islamic discourse, the religious discourse, was President Sisi. And he did it in the midst of the Azhar, the highest authority in Islam. We should not forget that, because this is a very courageous move, and that's why he is the target of the Islamists, the Daesh, the Qaeda, the whatever you want. We want this man to succeed. We know that there are many obstacles. We know that there are many reservations that we have, considering liberty of expression or human rights or whatever. But that is not the time now. The time now is to support a man who has popularity, that when he came to, among his many projects, when he came to open the second line of the Suez Canal, he managed to get 64 billion pounds from the Egyptian people in less than 8 days. So this means, this proves the credibility that he has, this proves the support that he has in the Egyptian, among the Egyptian people. So, to say that this is a military regime, that this is a military coup, will get us nowhere. It is best to see, as you said, listen to the people. The people want him. The people want him to succeed. The people know that he has risked his life to finish us from a theocratic government who wanted to bring women to the Middle East by keeping them at home, by bringing back genital mutilation, by bringing back marriage of young girls at the age of 9, and so on. So please try to see the things more objectively, what is happening. If Egypt falls, the whole region falls. And I'm not saying this as an Egyptian, I'm saying this as an Arab and this is what I'm told whenever I go to any Arab country. Please, we want you to succeed. And we will succeed, I know we will. But it takes time, as you said, not 5 years or 10 years, we won't be there, I think, but it will take time. Another thing that the president is doing today is, not the president, but today we have parliamentary elections. We are in the midst of parliamentary elections, which is the third phase of the roadmap for that he has established. And in the new constitution, we have more in favor of women and more in favor of Christians. Something that has never happened before. He has proved that in his discourse about the reform of Islam, he made it a point, coming from Kuwait from the plane, to go to the Coptic cathedral. First time an Egyptian president goes to the Coptic cathedral during Christmas Day. So, I mean, try to see the positive aspects. We know that there are negative aspects, but try to see the positive aspects, that a man who's doing whatever he's doing, he has a population of 90 million today, he has the biggest army, and we have all our army today in the Sinai, trying to save the borders, to protect the borders in Egypt. So please be more objective, particularly the foreign press, particularly the Western press. Try to see things as they are. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mona. And I would like to emphasize one point you made about Sisi's speech in the Al-Azhar University. That, I think it was in December last year. And I saw this was mentioned, a very courageous speech, as you said. He just, pointed his finger to the rector of the university, and he said, "This is not Islam. You must, denounce, etc., etc." And there was not a single report in the Western press on this event. That's very, very. It was not even mentioned.
Yeah. Right.
So thank you very much. So now we are going to have. I think at this stage I would like to give the floor to Vitaly Naumkin because everybody today recognizes first that Russia has a long historical experience of these problems, in fact, at least going back to the 70s, 80s, and probably before. And second, everybody recognizes today of the importance of some sort of cooperation, not to say alliance, with your country. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. I would like to start with my condolences to the French people and my thanks to Egypt, who placed not only the French flag over the pyramids, but also the Lebanese one and the Russian one. And if we start with this new reality in the Middle East, which is clearly alarming, not only because of the terrorist threat, but due to a lot of other things. We know all this popular unrest and popular grievances that led to the Arab revolutions. But there is also another features which are alarming. It's clearly that the Arab world is a set of deeply divided societies that are witnessing a very deep crisis of identity and also a very deep crisis of the whole concept of nation state. Even some analysts in the region are speaking about the end of Sykes-Picot system and so on and so forth. I'm not very much supportive to this, but still it's a real crisis. And we have to do something with it. We have to understand the future of the Middle East, not only through the lens of terrorism and extremism, but also through the lens of this crisis and how to solve it. We have several failed states, especially Libya, Yemen, Iraq, and Syria. I am in favor of finding some comprehensive solution to the Syrian and Iraqi crisis together. Because I'm afraid that to find a solution only to the Syrian crisis will be not enough to deal with this part of the world. And yes, what's happening there, it's very worrisome. We have significant parts of Syria and Iraq still, ruled by this Islamic State, which is not only a terrorist organization, but a new concept of nation building. And sometimes it looks attractive for a lot of people. We can repeat endlessly this mantra that it has nothing to do with Islam. Islam is nice. All religions are nice. And Islam, of course, it's great. It's great religion. But these people are presenting exclusivist interpretations of Islam. And there are not plenty of forces within the Muslim world. And we are part of it because we have 20 million Muslims, mostly Sunnis in Russia. And sometimes the preachers, teachers of Islam cannot, defeat these exclusivist interpretations of Islam. It's true. And let's be fair. If we say that 300,000 people have been killed, first, half of them have been killed. Half of them are within the opposition and the Islamists, and half of them are the Syrian army and the people who are loyal to the regime, and especially Alawis, the Alawi community. And let's not forget that during the 10 years of the presence of the coalition forces in Iraq, around 600,000 people were killed there. Let's not forget about that. I'm not accusing anyone, but it was very difficult for the coalition forces to protect these people. Let's not forget that from 2 million Christians, only 1/10 are left there, not more than 200,000. So it's a real tragedy. It's a real tragedy. And speaking about this coexistence and peaceful solutions, we cannot forget about that. If I'm jumping from one subject to another because, not plenty of time, but we're speaking about the Vienna process. It's very promising. It means that we can work together. We can work together through making concessions, but still it's difficult, even if we all agree about the nature of the future Syrian state. So it's secular, but there are a lot of forces within the opposition and in Syrian societies who are against this secular vision of the state. We're speaking about rights of ethnic minorities. And by the way, our president, in his recent speech on Syria, he also mentioned the rights of ethnic minorities, religious minorities. But Arab nationalists, who are a very significant segment of the Syrian society, including the regime forces and some parts of the opposition, are against this vision. They say it's a unitary state. It means that there are only, components, mukawinat, and there are no minorities. You cannot use the name of this word, of minorities. I was chairing 2 series of talks, inter-Syrian talks in Moscow, in January and April. And there was a real battle between the Kurds, who are in favor of this, and the governmental delegation and some groups from the opposition. It's not so easy to find a solution to that. Whether it's going to be a highly centralized state, as it has been during all these years, or it's going to be decentralized. Of course, it's up to them to discuss. And the contact group can be helpful. There will be now Paris process, because Vienna will move to Paris. The group will move to Paris. By the way, I think I like this notion of contact group. It worked with the Iranian nuclear program. I think we badly need such a group, to create such a group on Libya, because the Institute of High Representative of the Secretary General is not properly working, with all my due respect to Ambassador Bernardino Leon. We need, it's my personal view. And I think that is promising, but even the small issue, who is terrorist? We know, especially now our French friends and we Russians, we know well, we understand who the terrorists are. But if we come to the negotiations, we can see that for the Emirates, a couple of days ago, I came back from the United Arab Emirates. For them, the main terrorist group is Hezbollah. For the Turks, it's PYD, which is supported by the Americans and by Russians. And for the Egyptians, it's Muslim Brotherhood. So what to do with all that? I don't know. I think it can be solved, but it needs a lot of patience and a lot of diplomatic skills and readiness to make compromises in favor of finding adequate solutions. And coming back to the ideas that were mentioned here about what to do, I agree that, of course, we can find solutions to these four failed states crisis, but given the very, very shaky situation about this nation-state state concept, it will be very difficult to accommodate it with the new realities. Whether the borders between the states will remain the same, or as some people believe, it's inevitably will be changed. A lot of people are speaking about the creation of a Kurdish state, independent Kurdish state, whether in one country or probably in a number of countries. We can all feel this very strong quest, very strong desire to build an independence. We have already at least two states in both Iraq and Syria. We can see most quasi-independent entities or autonomies of self-rule. What's going to happen to them? Can we envisage the preservation of a unitary state under the auspices of a federal constitutional order or something else? I don't know, but also it needs a lot of patience and a lot of creative thinking. Then, coming back to ending violence in Syria, we all agree that it's needed. But how can we do that? There is the main desire of the people who gathered in Vienna was to provide national ceasefire. Whether this national ceasefire is possible under the existence of these terrorist groups, which are dispersed all over the country. A lot of people have doubts about that, though our American partners and Mr. Secretary Kerry especially, he's stressing the importance of this national ceasefire. We supported that, but at the same time, our experts have a lot of doubts about the possibility of providing ceasefire, either whether it's better. We have to envisage, for instance, local ceasefire instead of that. Also, I'm not sure about that. But the fact that these exclusivist visions of Islam provided by these terrorists, and especially the so-called Islamic State, or Daesh, Qaeda, and some other groups, it's threatening, because there are a lot of supporters to that. If we take Russia, for Russia, this terrorist threat is very important because we have not less than 2,500 jihadis who went to Syria to fight in the ranks of Daesh, 2,500, and not less than 4,000 from Central Asia. It's the whole army which might be returning if they remain alive, the same as the returnees made a problem for France and for all other European nations. They can celebrate their victory, which in their social networks you can read that they are saying that they were able to change Europe. It's one of the points of where they're very triumphalistic, in this approach. And I'll finish with one thing. We have to understand these realities on the ground and to understand the mentality of these people, why they are so attractive to young generation of people who are living in Europe, in the United States, in Russia, everywhere. They're coming there to die. So one of our deputies, members of the parliament, just yesterday asked me, he said, what do you think about our new proposal? A group of deputies proposed to introduce death penalty for terrorists. I told him, regardless of our obligations, European obligations, I think that's the best service to the terrorists.
Exactly.
Because they're ready to die. These people, they're not afraid of that. They'll be ready to die. They're seeing doors to paradise through your death penalty. We have to understand this mentality and this logic, and to do something with that, not only by using aircraft and troops on the ground to combat these crazy people. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. One factual question to you and a slightly less factual question. The factual question is, am I mistaken with the figure you have in mind that there are 100,000 mixed couples, Syrian, Russian? Is that correct?
Yes.
So that's a very important figure that very few people are aware of, and which certainly explain a number of geopolitical facts. My other question is, well, as you say that each country has its own preferred terrorists, so to speak, but when you are in face of a very complex situation, you have to put a hierarchy. And is it not true from the Russian viewpoint, from your viewpoint, is it true or not that ISIS or Daesh is a more fundamental threat than other terrorist groups?
No, I don't think so. I think Nusra is of the same importance, of the same, volume of, threats coming from its both ideology and military activities and terrorist activities. They're very well organized, very well trained for projecting their activities abroad, and their links to Al-Qaeda are famous, and that's why we are always, we have debates with some states in the Arab world who are in favor of, mitigating their relations with probably Nusra, or trying to convince Nusra to dissociate from Al-Qaeda. And here, there'll be more approach like a moderate organization, which is not acceptable at all.
So the non-agreement on the priorities is obviously one of the problems for a coalition. Right. So, Jim, now we need a viewpoint from the United States, and how, the American public opinion, is it satisfied with Obama's strategies in the Middle East, if the word strategy can be used at all?
Public opinion is largely in sync with the president's policies in the Middle East. That has a lot to do with the fact that he can very much help shape opinion on foreign affairs in the American system. But people are war-weary. People are eager not to get more deeply involved. And the president, for his own reasons, has augmented that support. Thierry, thank you for giving me a chance to give one American's perspective on the future of the Middle East, an American who has lived and worked in Beirut and throughout the region. We've just heard from my co-panelist an impressive list of the difficulties facing the Middle East right now, and it falls to me to tell you that it's even worse, that at least it is even broader than I think what you've heard so far. Because it's my view that what we've seen here is the beginning of an era of very violent backlash, and primarily backlash against globalization. At the end of the 20th century and the beginning of the 21st century, we saw this amazing flow of goods, of people, of ideas, of business across borders that we call globalization. What it has begun to do, and particularly I think in the Middle East and particularly in the Arab world, is to begin to exert enormous pressure, not simply on national borders, on nation states, but on the fundamental elements and units of society, the family system, the clan system, the tribal system that exist in different parts and different ways in the Middle East. And we have to recognize that this is a cultural problem, an extremely difficult and deep cultural problem. And again, I emphasize, in the Arab world most of all, that has to be recognized, at least, if we're going to make any progress. So Obama has taken a certain attitude that the White House deigns to call strategic retrenchment from the Middle East. And as I say, it generally fits the American public opinion, the general mood. And I went over this morning a little bit, and Nelson Cunningham also went over the domestic political pressures. What I'd like to do simply, Thierry, is to list what I see as 3 or 4 major changes that are happening in the United States that have direct effect on the Middle East today and in the future. The first 2 are the primary interest of the Middle East for the United States since a long time. The first being oil. And it is an objective fact today that the United States is much less reliant on Middle Eastern oil than it has been at any time in the past half century. And that is likely to continue. We've seen a significant change in the technology of the oil business in the United States because of the development of shale oil and gas. And we've just seen it happen recently, proven that oil companies today, even the small ones who have been doing the fracking in North Dakota and elsewhere, have the ability to drill more cheaply and faster than ever before in American history, and can put the oil on the market very rapidly and at prices that would have made absolutely no sense. The Saudis in particular have responded by saying that they want to maintain market share, and therefore they're willing to accept the prices. That is not going to change in the next 6 months, I don't think, or perhaps even in the next 6 years, if you look at the forecast of where oil prices are likely to be. So that is a significant change for the United States. There is an embryonic but ongoing change in American relations with Israel. This administration has a particular view, but once again, I think the president is both sensing and leading public opinion on this. You've seen in his eagerness to have a deal with Iran on the nuclear question, he's been willing to take on the Israeli political leadership in ways that very few American governments have. He has rushed to compensate Israel for that, because he's no fool looking at the political realities of American politics today. He has provided, and he is very eager to be able to tell everybody that he has provided Israel with more security assistance than anybody else ever has, and that he will continue to do so. A change that I feel very strongly, and it relates very much to some things that Vitaly was just saying, is the absence of superpower conflict in the Middle East. Sure, we don't agree on Assad, but there is no fundamental reason why the United States and Russia have to be in conflict over Syria or over the Middle East at large. That's quite a change from the days when I worked in the Middle East, and it's something that we should be able to build on, perhaps through the Vienna process, as Thierry has mentioned. Those are the 3 changes I'll throw out for discussion, and I'll yield back to you, Thierry.
Well, thank you very much. I'm relatively struck that so far the importance of the Iranian agreement has not been that much mentioned. So before we move to Bernard, the last speaker, I would like to ask each of you to answer, but yes or no. Is it a good news? Is the Iranian agreement, Iranian nuclear agreement, is it a good news with the perspective of the reduction of the degree of chaos in the Middle East? So no subtle answer. Yes or no? Yes or no?
Yes and no.
Les Marocains sont devenus normands.
Yes, because it offers Iran to reintegrate the region. It offers the international community to verify. And we need Iran to be able to play a positive role in solving the conflict in the region, because Iran is important. Now, the question is this nuclear deal is going to be implemented fully and faithfully?
Elisabeth?
I think it's a very good news because first, as you know, France was very demanding and we have a very solid agreement. Of course, it remains to be implemented, I agree, especially in the United States, to see what the Congress is going to do. But still, it's good to have this agreement. And, but it would be probably wrong to think that because we have this agreement, Iran will change completely its views on the Middle East question. I went twice to Iran in July and recently, about a month ago. I have quite a regular meeting with my counterpart, Mr. Bourou-Gerdi, and I can see that although there is inside Iran a fight, I would say, between the reformists around Rouhani and his government and the conservative inside the Majlis, the parliament. Of course, this is simplified, but roughly. So whatever their differences, and inside, there is a block towards their position towards Iran. And one, of course, of the main question in the Vienna process is whether we can keep Iran around the table, which is absolutely indispensable, and whether Iran and Russia can work together to get Syria and members of the regime around the table, since I believe, as well as some, that of course Mr. al-Assad cannot be the future of his people.
Thank you very much. Mona?
I think it is a very good deal, the Iran deal, but we must not forget also, as you said, it has to implement what it has promised to do, but we must also not forget that Iran is a major player because it's an old civilization. It is not a new state. Okay? Right. So it is a main player in the region.
That is why at lunch, I asked the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Qatar, I said that we should not put Iran and Saudi Arabia at the same level.
Not.
They are not comparable. So, Vitaly?
Yes, I agree that it's yes, but there are, of course, some problems. There are hardliners in Iran who are criticizing Rouhani for this nuclear deal, and some experts believe that in order to deter these criticisms, he may become more assertive in the regional affairs. And please don't exaggerate the level of or the power alliance between Russia and Iran. We still have different agendas. For instance, Russia has no religious agenda in Syria, and Iran has a powerful religious agenda in its regional policy by defending all Shia everywhere in the Muslim world. And he has full right to do that. But Iran is a very pluralistic society with a lot of elements of democracy, one of rare cases in this part of the world, and the most stable state now in the Middle East. I think so. If not the only, but one of the most stable. I'm not, I have nothing against Egypt, you know.
I know.
But there are a lot of similar cases, but you cannot deny that Iran has less internal problems
Yes.
in the terms of its stability and stability of its system, whether you like it or not. And so it means that still we have to see how the events are going to unfold in this country.
Thierry, my answer to your yes or no question is up to a point. But basically, I agree with all with the positive sentiment expressed by my colleagues and their qualifications on it. Iran and Saudi Arabia are not the same state, clearly, but they are engaged in an existential struggle to see who's going to dominate the Gulf.
Exactly.
That is very deadly, very destructive.
Well, even if none of you, which I don't know, have studied quantum mechanics, I see that you all know the basics of quantum mechanics, and in particular the Schrödinger cat's story. In a nutshell, the Schrödinger cat can be both alive and dead. So, Bernard, you have the last word. As I said, I think you have a very special experience because that's, again, you know, a quantum mechanics experience because you are both British and Iraqi, so to speak. So your viewpoint will be very much listened to.
More like quantum physics, really, than quantum mechanics. But, we'll leave that discussion for another time. I would like to focus on the tectonic shifts that have taken place and are taking place in the relationship between the Western powers, global powers, and the regional state actors, particularly divorcing regional stability from regime security. Because for decades since the Second World War, the implicit contract was to safeguard regime security in return for regional stability. With the fall of President Mubarak, the perception, if not the reality, subsequently the reality, crept into the thinking of the regional state actors that that contract is over. And therefore, the regional state actors clearly have taken the position of abandoning the globalist agenda and the global game in favor of a zero-sum classical power struggle in their own backyards. That has taken place with the Saudi decision to decline the offer to take up their seat at the UN Security Council. That has manifested itself in various regional entanglements, in a heightened conflict clearly between the Gulf states or many of the Gulf states and Iran. And it has been triggered, but not necessarily caused, but triggered by what Jim mentioned, which is the American disengagement and the pivot towards the Far East, the disengagement from the Middle East for the very good reasons that Jim also mentioned, which are to do, to a large degree, with the expected self-sufficiency in energy in North America, but also to the realization that there is really very little to be gained by committing the sort of resources on the ground over a prolonged period of time in the region. Now, that has created clearly a vacuum of control. Into that vacuum of control, all sorts of state and non-state actors moved in, including Daesh, al-Nusra, and all sorts of regional conflicts, intra-regional conflicts, flared up. So, what is the shape? What is particularly interesting, I think, is to explore what the shape of the future relationship between the regional state actors and the global powers is going to look like. In the absence of a proactive and dominant American position all the time that all the actors in the region used as a benchmark to position themselves periodically against. The Russian re-engagement in the Middle East clearly has expressed a very clear and unequivocal political and geostrategic statement, returning to the region with force. Frankly, it has been that particular return has awakened many actors in the region, Egypt, the Gulf states, to the fact that Russia is back to play potentially a long-term role, and therefore even Saudi Arabia has decided since June this year to engage with Russia when the Deputy Crown Prince visited Moscow, and various other meetings took place. There were discussions around energy, there were discussions around potentially Syria and possible solutions that will shift the position of the protagonists more towards a transitional period during which the current government will remain in place before a final solution is found. The key question really is, what is Europe as a bloc, and the various European states, what is the grand plan, if any, for re-engagement in their own backyard? There seems to still be a lack of realization in Europe that the US has disengaged, and therefore it is very clearly a problem that Europe will have to deal with as a bloc and as individual states. And that following the example of whatever policy the United States wishes to implement is no longer, in fact, a valid or useful option. I don't see any indication of any particular Europe-wide strategy, or for that matter, national European strategies to re-engage with the Middle East strategically. And I think this is creating a second vacuum in the Middle East, epitomized by the lack of effective responses to the refugee crisis. But also it raises a longer-term question, which is, will Europe and the different European states compete or cooperate with Russia in the Middle East? That is a very complex question, not least because the energy dynamics of the global markets complicate the geostrategic and geopolitical picture. Qatar is the second largest gas exporter after Russia. Saudi Arabia comes second, I think, or third after Russia as the largest producer of oil. Russia, of course, now is the largest producer of oil at about 10.4 million barrels, I believe. And the dynamics of the global gas market and competition, the dynamics of the oil, separate from the gas, the dynamics of the oil market and competition, and the cash cycle of the energy proceeds in the region, as well as globally, is going to be as important, in my view, in the exploratory phase of looking into whether Europe and the European states will cooperate or compete with Russia. I had to hasten because I touched slightly on the proceeds of energy and so forth, that one of the emerging complicating factors in the Middle East and its relationship with the global community is threat finance. It's beyond terrorism financing. This is legitimate financing through trading companies that is involved in all sorts of areas, pharmaceuticals, foodstuffs, all sorts of areas that are perfectly legitimate. And it is very likely that this will become yet another layer in the complex web of areas that will have to be explored in the new architecture of relationships between the Middle East, Russia and Europe on the one side, on the one hand, and Russia and Europe and the different European actors on the other.
Well, thank you very much, and you have added a few additional elements of complexity, and I don't know because I don't know how you can translate in English the French expression "on n'est pas sorti de l'auberge." I don't know if there is anyone, but I would.
Not out of the woods yet.
Huh?
We're not out of the woods yet.
We are not out of the woods yet. Well, well, I suggest now we have about 15 minutes left. So my strategy, because I think we have worked a lot since early this morning, so I think it would be unwise to extend the session. So what we are going to do is to take a few interventions from the floor, and I start with Jacob Frankel, who is not going to talk about central banking. Or maybe you could speak of central banking in the Islamic State.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Well, in fact, in 1987, when I was the economic counselor of the IMF, head of research, I'm very proud to say that we produced the first paper that was discussed in the board about Islamic banking. But this is not the subject today. The title of the session is The Future of the Middle East. Now, this is the 8th edition of Global Governance, and I looked at programs from previous years, and indeed, you always had a session in one way or another about the future of the Middle East. At the beginning, it meant the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Subsequently, after a detour, it became the Arab Spring. Today, it is Syria and terrorism. And it forced me to think about what do we mean when we speak about the Middle East? Do we talk about a geography, or do we talk about a phenomenon? About Sunni Shiite, about religion? Is Mali part of the Middle East in this context? So it's a very broad issue. And a broad issue means that the answer to it is also complex and long. And by the same token, and I fully agree with our Egyptian friend, she said, don't give me the solution of 10 years. 5 years is too much. You know, Francis Bacon, the English poet, once wrote that hope is a great breakfast. It's a terrible supper. And in Egypt, we are in supper time. So we really cannot wait for those 5 years. So how do we reconcile it? I think we have two types of problems, and each one has its own rhythm. One is the age-long issues about the role of religion and the Middle East in the broader context, and this will take time, and the word patience was mentioned several times. But by the same time, there is the urgency. And the urgency, whether it is ISIS, as everyone said, or another group, but there is one thing in common to those groups of terrorism. It's an extraordinary abuse, kidnapping concepts of religion into the wrong direction. And there, heading head-on is the only way. Frankly, I must say, if you start by saying, I'm against ISIS, I'm against those groups, but, I don't want to have boots on the ground, and I'm willing to lead from behind, those are mutually contradicting statements. Then you are not against ISIS, in the urgency that our friend from Egypt and everyone else would say. So I think that when you mentioned, Elisabeth, that indeed it is a subject that all of us must do together, the minister from Qatar today illustrated that when you say together, we need first to agree to do what together. If half say, for me, together means keeping Bashar Assad, and if another group says, for me, together means not keeping, then we need to resolve this first and then go together to wherever we want. I was impressed by the fact that Vienna got such an important role in this meeting. And I think this is reflecting the fact that we are eager to have a hopeful sign. Because 3 months ago, 4 months ago, nobody knew what Vienna meant. And the problems are still were with us. By the same token, ISIS, 5 years ago, we did not mention, but still in the long context, Middle East problem was there. So we need really to separate the urgent and the less urgent. And the urgent is to deal with terrorism, because terrorism will force us to recognize that Mali is part of the Middle East. And we really don't want to get into this world.
Well, Jacob, I would not like to add to your very eloquent intervention, but to say that the first question, if I may rephrase in slightly different terms, one basic question: do the main powers in the region, whatever you define, however you define the region, that is the regional powers and the main external powers, do they at least agree on one question, which is the desirability of the reduction of chaos? Because just the answer to that question could create pressure for cooperation. In other words, if chaos increases, that would be detrimental to everyone, because no one can predict for sure the consequences of an increase in chaos. But anyway, now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Walloulou, former mayor of Rabat, and then Riyad Tabet behind from Lebanon. And if I may ask, not too long, because I would like to take 1 or 2 more questions, and then we will have to wind up. No, it doesn't work. No, we cannot hear you.
Je me félicite du choix de ce thème à la fin de cette journée. Et je crois qu'effectivement, comme l'a dit Elisabeth,
vous pouvez parler plus près du micro.
C'est autour du Moyen-Orient où on peut agir et agir ensemble aujourd'hui. Bien sûr, nous sommes aujourd'hui tous solidaires avec la France et avec le Mali, et en 2001 avec les Américains, c'est normal. Bien sûr, aujourd'hui, nous devons tout faire pour lutter contre le terrorisme, et on va le vaincre, techniquement, je dois dire. Bien sûr, nous, les musulmans, nous avons une obligation pour promouvoir un islam tolérant, pour améliorer la gouvernance du champ religieux, par l'éducation essentiellement et par autre chose. Mais agir ensemble, c'est ouvrir les yeux de tout le monde. Ce qui se passe, c'est quoi l'islamisme? Pourquoi cet islamisme est né après l'échec de l'arabisme? Parce que dans la région, dans toute cette grande région, où on retrouve aussi l'Afrique, le Maghreb, la Méditerranée et le Moyen-Orient, il y a eu un sentiment d'injustice. Et là, ce qu'il faut faire, c'est une stratégie de paix, une réelle stratégie de paix au Moyen-Orient, au sein des pays concernés maintenant, la Syrie, l'Irak, la Libye. Une stratégie de paix dans laquelle les grandes puissances, l'Europe, la Russie, les États-Unis doivent jouer un rôle essentiel, et les puissances régionales, bien sûr. Mais il ne faut pas oublier, bien sûr, il faut être aujourd'hui avec Vienne, le processus de Vienne. Mais il faut qu'on se rappelle tous d'un autre processus qu'on a oublié, celui d'Oslo. Il faut que Vienne amène à Oslo. C'est ça ce qui est fondamental. Et je crois que Youssef, en parlant du Moyen-Orient, nous a dit essentiellement ne pas oublier la mère des questions, ce que nous appelons dans le monde arabe la mère des questions. C'est la question du conflit israélo-arabe. Il faut pousser Israël et les Palestiniens à se mettre d'accord. Et je crois ma question principale aux intervenants, c'est comment faire dans les mois et dans les années à venir pour pousser tout ce monde, pour agir ensemble, effectivement, pour la vraie paix, ne pas vaincre techniquement, c'est possible, Daesh, mais est-ce créer essentiellement le fondement d'un travail en commun? L'Afrique, le Sahel, la Méditerranée, l'Europe, le vertical et l'horizontal que tu connais très bien, Elisabeth, eh bien c'est autour de la question du Moyen-Orient qu'il peut se faire. Merci.
Bien, merci. Je crois que beaucoup d'entre nous sommes d'accord avec vous, en particulier sur la question du problème israélo-palestinien. Ça va faire presque 70 ans que ce problème n'est pas réglé. Il faut aussi le rappeler très fermement. Je vais passer la parole à Riyad Tabet et ensuite à Mohamed Laïchoubi. Et je pense qu'après, il va falloir, hélas, s'arrêter.
Soumettre à votre...
Plus près du micro.
Vous m'écoutez, non? Ça va?
Oui, oui.
Bon. Je vais soumettre à votre avis un schéma et j'aurai une question également à poser à Madame Guigou. Le schéma est le suivant. Au Liban, ça fait 18 mois que nous n'avons pas de président. Pourquoi? Parce qu'il y a d'un côté les chiites et une partie des chrétiens avec eux, et de l'autre côté les sunnites et une autre partie des chrétiens avec eux. Chaque parti a un candidat et le Parlement n'arrive pas à avoir le quorum pour se réunir pour élire un président. On attend que l'Arabie saoudite, qui appuie les sunnites, et l'Iran, qui appuie les chiites, s'entendent entre eux pour que nous ayons un président. Je transpose ce schéma à la région. Il y a le roi Abdallah de Jordanie avait parlé à un moment donné de croissant chiite. En fait, c'est une zone d'influence de l'Iran qui va de l'Iran, l'Irak, la Syrie et le Liban. Il y a une autre zone d'influence, un croissant sunnite, qui va des pays du Golfe, la Jordanie, l'Égypte. Chaque parti a sa zone d'influence. L'Arabie a des intérêts au Yémen, à Bahreïn. L'Iran a des intérêts stratégiques en Irak, en Syrie, au Liban. S'il n'y a pas un accord entre les deux leaders, qui sont ceux du croissant sunnite, avec comme leader l'Arabie saoudite, et l'Iran, le croissant chiite, s'ils ne s'entendent pas, la région va continuer à être déstabilisée. Ce n'est pas une guerre de religion, c'est une guerre d'influence, en fait. Une question à Madame Guigou. Vous avez parlé d'une coalition qui est large et unique, qui grouperait toutes les parties pour aller affronter et combattre Daesh. Pensez-vous que cette coalition pourra arriver à ses fins sans une intervention terrestre? Et s'il y a une intervention terrestre, qui va la faire? Merci.
Bien. Est-ce que ça manque beaucoup au Liban, le fait de ne pas avoir de président?
Nous n'avons pas de président, le gouvernement ne se réunit pas, le Parlement non plus depuis 2 ans. En fait, nous sommes arrivés au sommet de la démocratie, qui est l'autogestion. Chacun gère ses affaires. Merci.
C'était la réponse que j'attendais. Alors, Mohamed.
vous remercie. En fait, je félicite les différents acteurs et les différents débatteurs, non seulement aujourd'hui, mais hier, de la qualité des débats et surtout de la franchise. Ça nous permet d'avoir un espace qui n'est pas à la marge, mais qui permet aussi de reconsidérer un ensemble de visions stratégiques ou des logiques emmurées dans des concepts dépassés. Alors, ce que je voudrais noter et vous soumettre à la réflexion, si nous remontons le cours de l'histoire, il y a à peu près 70 ans, l'espace asiatique au lendemain de la Seconde Guerre mondiale était un espace d'une complexité absolument incroyable. Les deux bombes atomiques sont passées par là, le concept des kamikazes était là, les acteurs étaient et un espace extrêmement complexe, terrible, dur. Et on me dira toujours que maintenant la culture asiatique est une culture de la discipline, mais la réalité historique sur ces années-là passées donnait un tableau extrêmement noir et terrible pour une grande partie de l'humanité, avec des questionnements qui ne sont pas loin de celles que l'on se pose maintenant. Et l'on a développé une stratégie qui, à mon sens, a donné d'excellents résultats pour beaucoup d'espace, puisque les États-Unis, dans leur implication, ont obtenu des choses extrêmement intéressantes en partenariat économique, ont permis et ont aidé ces pays à la maîtrise du savoir, de la science. Et maintenant, nous avons des pays qui sont dans le concert des nations, qui sont parmi les premiers innovateurs, qui sont, par conséquent, qu'il s'agisse du Vietnam, après qu'il s'agisse, ces acteurs abominables sont devenus des partenaires d'une fiabilité incroyable et qu'on a écouté avec un plaisir extrêmement important. Alors transposons cette logique au Moyen-Orient, au Maghreb et au Sahel, et on se dit dans un premier temps que d'abord c'est possible. Il suffit qu'on ait la volonté politique, qu'on en ait la vision. Et alors, c'est l'émiettement des États-nations. Il faut avouer, là aussi, si on veut parler très honnêtement, qu'au-delà de ce qu'est la fragilité intérieure, due à des problèmes de légitimité, due à des problèmes de manque de démocratie, due à des problèmes de vision, et ça je le concède et je suis moi-même un des fervents analystes sur ces questions-là. Mais au-delà de ça, il faut se souvenir historiquement que dès la fin de l'ère postcoloniale, les États-nations naissants ont été confrontés. Il y a eu un affrontement, et je ne vais pas reconstituer le cours de l'histoire en 1956 et après, mais disons que les États-nations se sont retrouvés conceptuellement en affrontement avec d'autres espaces qui estimaient que la consolidation d'États-nations pas loin des frontières était un danger. Et on a souvent emprunté avec beaucoup de glorioles, etc., en disant les amis anglais ont très bien géré à un moment le Moyen-Orient, ils ont su gérer en déstabilisant, ils ont su. Cela veut dire qu'au-delà de tout cela, il y avait une vision, une stratégie pour arriver au résultat, en plus, je l'ai dit, des fragilités intérieures, pour arriver au résultat que nous visionnons maintenant. Ajoutons deux autres éléments. Le premier, quand on s'intéresse de façon utile et sérieuse, qu'est-ce qu'on relève? On relève que les États-Unis, dans leur espace stratégique du Sud, investissent la part de l'investissement est de 24,6% dans l'espace stratégique, que le Japonais investit 25,6% et que l'Europe investit 2%. Et donc, j'ai le sentiment qu'il va falloir prendre très au sérieux, moi personnellement, croire que pour des pays, nous allons bâtir deux mondes. Un monde où l'intégrisme islamiste, obscur, ténébreux, sur 20 ans, va s'engager, avoir deux populations dans un même État, une qui serait démocratique, toute blanche, une qui serait noire. Moi, j'ai le sentiment que ça, c'est des analyses trop courtes pour des gens aussi avisés, aussi intelligents et aussi subtils que ceux qui sont là. Et merci.
Merci Mohamed. Alors, à ce stade, c'est assez frustrant parce qu'il y a aussi dans cette salle beaucoup de personnalités très au fait de ces questions. On y reviendra, en particulier dans la session finale avec Miguel Moratinos. On y reviendra. On va avoir une session aussi sur pour faire un dialogue au moins israélo-palestinien. Je crois. je crois que Jacob Frankel nous aidera à trouver un autre titre que l'avenir du Moyen-Orient. Donc tout ça est assez frustrant, sauf un point, c'est que, comme l'a dit d'ailleurs Mohamed Laïchoubi, c'est qu'on peut ici, dans cette World Policy Conference, parler de ces choses-là avec des gens très différents, d'origine très différente, et que nous le faisons tous avec beaucoup de bonne volonté et sans polémique et surtout sans haine. Alors, je voudrais donner quand même, je peux malheureusement pas redonner la parole à tous les membres du panel, mais j'aimerais tout de même demander à Elisabeth Guigou de conclure.
Oui, d'abord sur la question qui m'a été posée, la grande coalition que la France souhaite. Bon, le président de la République française va être à Washington mardi, à Moscou jeudi. J'espère que, en effet, les choses vont avancer parce que je ne vois pas comment on peut espérer réduire les différences d'approche si nous n'avons pas tous les acteurs autour de la table, les acteurs principaux, ceux du Conseil de sécurité des Nations Unies, bien entendu. Et moi, je suis très heureuse, évidemment, du dialogue qui s'est intensifié entre la France et la Russie et personnellement entre le président Hollande et le président Poutine, depuis le voyage qu'a fait le président Hollande à partir du Kazakhstan, et notamment aussi sur la discussion sur l'Ukraine. Mais chaque fois, il parle aussi du Moyen-Orient. Donc ça, parce qu'évidemment, la Russie a un rôle essentiel. Si on avait un peu plus de temps, j'aurais aimé savoir ce qu'il en est de la rivalité de la Russie et de l'Iran dans la région, mais enfin, ça, j'y reviendrai peut-être. En tout cas, c'est vrai qu'il faudra certainement des interventions terrestres si on veut vaincre vraiment Daesh. Mais ça ne peut pas être le fait des puissances extérieures, à mon avis, à la région. Le choix qu'a fait la France, c'est d'apporter un appui aérien. Bien sûr, le cas échéant, il y a toujours des forces spéciales qui sont là pour encadrer, pour aider à l'utilisation du matériel. Donc ça, oui. Je pense qu'il faut aider davantage les Kurdes qui ont réussi à reprendre Sinjar, qui est un point clé majeur entre Mossoul, évidemment, et la Syrie. Mais je crois qu'une intervention terrestre de la part de la France pour l'Europe ou d'autres, à mon avis, extérieure à la région serait une erreur. Je crois que c'est vraiment la responsabilité des pays de la région. Alors après, cette grande coalition, elle a déjà, j'espère, que Vienne, dont on n'a pas suffisamment parlé, j'espère que Vienne va être le début de la réalisation de cette grande coalition. Vienne, c'est quand même la première fois que tous les acteurs se retrouvent autour de la table. Alors on dit, bien sûr qu'il y a des différences extraordinaires, personne n'est d'accord, chacun son ennemi privilégié. Quand même, il y a au moins deux accords. D'abord, il faut lutter contre le terrorisme, contre Daesh et tous les épigones. Et la deuxième, c'est qu'il faut trouver une solution politique. Et trouver le chemin, c'est-à-dire le processus politique. Or, à Vienne, sur la Syrie, on a commencé à définir ce que devrait être ce processus politique. Je ne sais pas si on progressera, mais en tout cas, on a défini un calendrier, l'unité de la Syrie, on a dit qu'il fallait un cessez-le-feu, mais couplé, évidemment, au processus politique. On a fixé le calendrier pour la fin de l'année, dans les 6 mois qui viennent, dans 18 mois, les élections. Donc ça, c'est un acquis. À partir de là, j'espère qu'on pourra progresser aussi sur les autres conflits politiques dans la région. La question de la Libye est majeure, parce que l'expansion de Daesh autour de Sirte en Libye est évidemment extraordinairement inquiétante. Et que, bien entendu, Israël, Palestine, surtout n'oublions pas, moi je suis d'accord, Fatala, c'est vrai, c'est la mère des conflits, tous les pays arabes résonnent comme ça, c'est dans l'impasse totale. Moi je crois qu'il ne faut surtout pas se résigner à cette impasse, j'espère, on en parlera davantage demain. Et puis, bien entendu, il y a aussi le fait que Daesh est à Gaza. Voilà, donc si on ne progresse pas là-dessus, on ne prend pas conscience de ça. Alors cette grande coalition, moi je pense, on en a l'amorce, j'espère qu'on va pouvoir poursuivre ce processus. Je voudrais dire peut-être aussi répondre à la question sur l'Europe. Non, il n'y a pas de stratégie européenne unifiée. C'est désolant, évidemment, que l'Europe ne se rende pas davantage compte que ses intérêts, en dehors de la responsabilité historique, morale, évidemment, mais son intérêt est de se tourner davantage vers son sud, non seulement vers le Moyen-Orient, mais vers le Maghreb et vers l'Afrique subsaharienne, parce que tout est lié, évidemment, aujourd'hui. C'est l'intérêt de sécurité, c'est l'intérêt économique de développement, c'est un intérêt pour maîtriser les flux de population, c'est un intérêt pour la COP21, le climat. Alors, il y a des amorces de ça, mais on est évidemment loin du compte. Sauf que, je trouve là aussi, parce que je crois qu'il faut essayer de voir les éléments qui peuvent nous redonner de l'espoir. Quand le ministre français de la Défense, mardi matin, est allé à la réunion des ministres de la Défense européens pour dire, écoutez, la France ne peut pas être seule en Europe à défendre nos intérêts de sécurité et à lutter contre le terrorisme, j'ai besoin de votre contribution. Il y a eu un accord unanime, pour que, on savait qu'on a invoqué un article du traité, 42 alinéa 7, qui est un peu notre article 5 entre Européens, et nous avons choisi de ne pas invoquer l'article 5 de l'OTAN parce que nous voulons continuer à pouvoir dialoguer avec la Russie, et que, évidemment, chaque fois qu'on invoque l'OTAN, ça rend les choses plus compliquées. Mais là, il y a eu un accord unanime, et le ministre de la Défense nous a dit à la Commission des Affaires étrangères, sans nous donner les chiffres parce qu'il n'a pas à parler pour les autres, qu'il y avait des engagements précis et importants. Alors, il est possible, par exemple, que certains pays européens viennent soulager l'effort de la France justement au Sahel pour permettre à la France de s'engager davantage au Moyen-Orient, parce que c'est vrai que nos forces militaires sont quand même réduites et puis que nos forces sont fatiguées. Donc je pense que ces événements tragiques provoquent une prise de conscience. On est loin évidemment d'une politique étrangère et de défense européenne, mais enfin, cet article 42, alinéa 7, ça fait 30 ans qu'il est dans le traité, parce que c'est bien avant le traité de Lisbonne qu'on l'a négocié, qu'on a imaginé d'avoir un traité d'assistance, une clause d'assistance mutuelle en transposant ce qui existait dans l'UEO dans le traité d'Union européenne, mais c'est la première fois qu'on l'utilise. Alors, on se rend compte, peut-être un élément d'optimisme, c'est qu'on se rend compte maintenant dans l'Union européenne que si on veut régler les problèmes, que ce soit les problèmes de sécurité, les problèmes de réfugiés, nous sommes condamnés à travailler ensemble. Dans Schengen, on est resté au milieu du gué. Sur la défense européenne, c'est la même chose. Donc, on a besoin de plus d'Europe. Alors, j'espère qu'on arrivera à le faire. Enfin, dernier mot vraiment, les États, c'est essentiel. Les politiques de gouvernement, les grandes coalitions, j'espère. Mais nous avons besoin de la société civile. Les États ne peuvent pas tout faire. Et spécialement parce que c'est une lutte idéologique, nous avons besoin que les citoyens prennent ça en compte, avec leurs différences, avec leurs mots à eux. Parce que ce n'est pas d'en haut qu'on va pouvoir dire, sûrement pas à partir d'Europe ou des États-Unis, qu'on va pouvoir dire dans les pays arabes, voilà les mots que vous devez prononcer. Et je ne pense même pas que ce sont les gouvernements. Je pense qu'il faut aider. Alors, tout à l'heure, Youssef mentionnait, moi j'ai été émerveillée. La dernière fois que je suis allée en Égypte, chaque fois que j'y vais, je rencontre le grand imam de la mosquée Al-Azhar. Qui est
de lui que j'ai parlé.
Quelqu'un d'une grande lucidité d'esprit et d'une grande clarté d'esprit.
Il est diplômé de Toulouse.
Et qui d'ailleurs sert un café absolument délicieux. Mais là, par exemple, la dernière fois, c'était il y a un mois à peu près, il nous a dit, j'étais avec le Premier ministre, Manuel Valls, nous avons regardé justement comment coopérer, comme nous le faisons avec le Maroc, pour la formation des imams. Et à la mosquée Al-Azhar, il est en train de se construire un centre de recherche pour qu'il y ait des travaux universitaires, principalement entre pays arabes, mais pas seulement, pour voir comment lutter contre la radicalisation. Ça, c'est très important. Et puisque Youssef Amrani a bien voulu mentionner la Fondation Annaline, pour le dialogue des cultures, c'est évidemment tout ce que peuvent faire des fondations, des think tanks, des associations. Nous, on a 4000 ONG. Notre siège est à Alexandrie. 4000 ONG dans les 42 pays autour de la Méditerranée. Si on ne se sert pas de ce vivier, de ce réseau, pour justement leur donner les moyens à ces jeunes principalement et à ces femmes, parce que c'est d'arriver eux-mêmes à s'emparer du discours, de construire un contre-discours de radicalisation, je pense qu'on aura gravement failli. Et ça, l'Europe doit davantage le faire en direction de la société civile aussi.
Bien, merci beaucoup. Alors, voilà. Je crois que... I would like to thank all the speakers and also all of you. And it's time now for a short break with cocktails, I think, which are going to be served upstairs, if I am not mistaken. And then we have a dinner debate with the CEO of Total, Patrick Pouyanné, the successor of Christophe de Margerie. And then, no, that's dinner. And then I will announce the exact timing of the night sessions.